Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The most interesting part for me in rereading India After Gandhi on its 10th anniversary edition was how prophetic and timely some of the themes actually seem. Nationalism. Who defines nationalism? What is nationalism? The rise of populist politics. Who would have thought that we were actually living at a time of this actually being not just an Indian phenomenon, but a global phenomenon? Individual liberties and what happens when it collides with a larger social sentiment, something that comes in the backdrop of so-called cow protectors and beef politics. And whether the BJP has, in a sense, taken the place of what Rajni Kothari famously called the Congress system. So much to talk about. We are going to want to keep this as interactive as possible. But I want to start, Ram, with the epilogue, the end of the book. And one of the questions you raise is about the quality of India's democracy. That we are a democracy is not in doubt. But are we a full democracy? Are we an evolving democracy? Are we still a democracy finding our direction? And you use Johnny Walker to say 50-50, 50-50. Which is the 50 that works and which is the 50 that doesn't?
Well, the 50 that works is the election part. So they're free and fair elections. But we are in danger of becoming, that works. Also, we have freedom of association. We can choose our friends, whom to hang around with. We can protest on the streets, hopefully non-violently. And we can move across India. In totalitarian regimes, the movements of citizens are controlled.
Right.
Right. So I think in these respects we are democratic. But we are in danger of becoming what I call in the new edition an elections-only democracy. So what happens between elections in the 5 years, and this is true not only at the central level, Barkha, it's true at the state level. In fact, in some ways the arbitrary, capricious, authoritarian behavior of leaders is manifest more in the states than the center. Of course, it's clearly manifest in the center as well. So public institutions, I think, for example, the institutions that we value as free and fair are the Election Commission, that largely retains its reputation, the judiciary, mostly but not fully, the army, again, mostly but not fully, the Reserve Bank after demonetization, I'm not sure.
I don't know what you're going to say about the media.
The media, I am not as critical of the media or self-critical of media as some people, and that may be because I live in Bangalore. Now, Bangalore gives you a distance of different kinds.
Come and live here, we'll tell you what we feel.
Okay. So it clearly, there are curbs. Clearly, the sections of the television media hurt India by their jingoism. I think this is a wonderful statement, which is quoted in the book, of Shah Faisal, the remarkable IAS officer in Kashmir, who wrote at the time of the new troubles in Kashmir, the beginnings, he said, every hour of prime time aggression on television sends many Kashmiris westwards. This is not, westwards is not only towards Pakistan, but towards Saudi Arabia, right? So I think they're clear, but I think there are sections of the print media that are still free. They are, I think, there's some very good websites. So clearly it could be, I don't think it's as bleak. Again, with the media, I think the real danger is in small towns, in Indian languages. You and I are free to say what we want about our leaders, right? But someone in Dharwad writing about sand mining and the links between the local MLA and the sand miner is in danger of his life or her life.
No, I
so
think...
in that sense, the media I won't be apocalyptic. Sure, clearly there are deficits. But I think the areas in which I would be apocalyptic are the civil service and the bureaucracy, which is increasingly politicized, and the police, which is arbitrary and often violent, and the criminal justice system. I mean, whenever I hear a party spokesman say the law will take its course, ask Vijay Mallya about the law will take its course, or Lalit Modi.
The way the law takes its own course is a flight to London, basically.
That's right. Yeah. Or the poor people. What happens to poor people? The state of our under trials. The fact that Dalits and Muslims are overwhelmingly represented among those often accused falsely of violent crime.
What is the one institution that you find the weakest in India that you believe should be stronger in a truly democratic country?
Barkha, I have always resisted privileging one institution, one cause,
name
one
three,
leader.
name four, name five.
I'd say the criminal justice system, the civil service, the police, and the lower courts, including the High Court, and possibly even elements in the Supreme Court. I think, so these are the 3 or 4 institutions that I worry about. I think the media is secondary. I think these are about public institutions, and we had outstanding civil servants. This book, I mean, two of the heroes of this book, of the original edition, were Sukumar Sen, who built our election system, and Tarlok Singh, who successfully resettled the Punjabi refugees. Now, there are some outstanding civil servants in this room, you know, and I have two or three really outstanding civil servants. Okay. But they are my age or older. I mean, will you find the same capability in the 30s and 40s, who have the courage and the independence to act in that way? So I think these are things, and also again, to say, at one level, being in Bangalore makes you more optimistic, but also more pessimistic, because state governments are even more malevolent sometimes than central government.
But you know, when you just said that political science began where history ended in 1947, everything that we've understood about ourselves is benchmarked against our colonial history, even the language we're conversing in right now. But if I were to look at what's really happening in democracies across the world, including in India, I would argue that actually we're getting more and more Americanized. And whether it's, and you refer to this, personality-centric politics, a more presidential form of politics, or whether it's even the media, there's a certain sort of populism and polarity that is driving the conversation. So do you believe that the India of 2017 is more American than British?
It is, but it could be in some ways in good ways too. America is not all dark and evil, right?
America's institutional freedoms are much more evolved than us.
What is institutional freedom, Barkha? For example, I think feminism is completely antithetical to the Indian ethos. Equality for women is antithetical to Hinduism and Islam, full stop. And whatever cherry picking you may do, from the Quran or the Vedas, forget it, right? And it's the feminist movement in America and the UK that has made many of us more sensitive. You know, you fought those battles yourself, right? That's one area. The other area in which maybe it could be becoming more American is entrepreneurship, which is no longer restricted to a particular caste or no longer restricted to family businesses. Now, that's a second area in which I think America could have had a salutary effect. A third area in which America could have had a salutary effect is that for the first time we have, in the past it was only the Parsis, you know, and the Parsis are the unique and the best of all, among all Indians, and maybe because in most respects they're not Indians at all, right? Right. So beyond the Tatas and the Godrejes, you have the Nilekanis and the Premjis are in many ways influenced by the Gates and the Buffetts, right? So I think that the interesting thing about India is that it adapts stupid things from America, but also maybe sometimes ennobling and democratic things. So some aspects of America, you know, I grew up as a leftist in Calcutta hating America, right? Now, the first day I went to America, I found, I had a job at an American university, and I was introduced to the dean of my department on the Friday. Saturday was a holiday. And I went for a walk in my university, which I was about to join, and I saw the dean of a great American university, a dean of a famous school, stopping his car on a Sunday morning. I was looking at him, opened the boot, took out a huge carton weighing 30 kilos, and carried up 3 flights. Now, my father and grandfather both ran research institutes. And if they had a file with a single paper, 3 chaprasis would be there waiting for them to take it up, right? Now, so I think the interesting thing about how social change works in India, it's always nuanced, it's always complex, it's always 50-50.
Anything is always 50-50.
No, many things are 50-50, yeah.
Now, there's a chapter in this book that's called The Rise of the BJP System.
Yeah.
And, you know, for those of us who've done a little bit of cursory political science, you're obviously referencing Rajni Kothari and the Congress system. Yeah. And the whole notion of one-party domination. But Rajni Kothari, of course, wrote about a time when the hegemony was occupied by the Congress party. And you've made the argument that that hegemony has been replaced today by the BJP. So are we essentially a country or a democracy that is a one-party polity at any given time? The parties could change, but it's the domination of one party.
That's a very interesting question, Barkha. And again, you know, I'd like to answer that partly at the central level, partly at the state level. So clearly we've been going 70 years. And we failed in emulating the stable two-party model of Western democracies. You know, the Swatantra Party wanted to do it, then the BJP wanted to do it, the Janata Party wanted to do it, and I think no one has any illusions that the Congress can ever become a major party again. Right. So we have clearly not gone towards a two-party system. We've gone from one.
You're saying the Congress cannot come back from this.
So
Ever or for the next 15 years?
You see,
10 years?
I hate to get into prediction.
No, because you said
but-
a never. You used the word never,
I
so
think
I'm pushing you on
I
it.
think the Congress, the best case scenario of the Congress would be to go from 44 to 100. But that may be a best case scenario, right? Now, if they have a new leader or new leadership tomorrow, things could change. I mean, 2 years is a long time in politics. If they kick out the Gandhi family, they may have a better future. Right. Now, but that's not going to happen. You can fantasize. I mean, I have my own fantasy, which I'd like to share with you.
Which is?
My fantasy is that there is a genuine leader in India. That is Nitish Kumar. He's a leader without a party. The Congress is a party without a leader. Now, if Nitish Kumar, if there could be a friendly takeover, but this is my fantasy.
I don't know if at this point I should get Jairam Ramesh into the conversation.
Okay.
Because, because he's sitting right there looking bashful for once in his life. But
let me bring it out to earth and more seriously. So you're right. I want to just make one important point, which is not facetious but scholarly and serious. I hope. See, you're right that it appears that we are oscillating from Congress system to BJP system at the central level.
Yes.
But I think the importance of a two-party rivalry at the states should not be underappreciated. There are people who are they are political scientists in the front row. Devesh Kapoor is here, and the others who know this much better than me. But as an outsider, it strikes me that the 3 states in India, which in my view, and I think some of the economists in this room will agree with me, the 3 states in India that have performed the best over a 70-year period in terms of economic and social indicators are Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Himachal Pradesh. And all have relatively stable two-party systems. Bengal ruled by 40 years by the left is a disaster. Gujarat being ruled by 25 years by the BJP is a disaster for Gujaratis. So the states that have stable two-party systems do the best. I mean, because the Congress is a check on the communists in Kerala, the Congress is a check on the BJP in Himachal, and where power alternates. So maybe we should focus on the states and build good two-party systems.
But I want to push you on your Nitish, the great hope that you see in Nitish.
So it's a fantasy.
It's a fantasy, but your fantasy went so far as to compare him to Barack Obama. I remember this.
Casually.
You colloquially said, who's the Obama of India is Nitish Kumar. But, when Indian liberals make Nitish our great hope in some ways, then are you foisting a greatness on him that he has actually not displayed? He has what you once called struck a Faustian deal with Lalu Prasad Yadav, who has been convicted of corruption.
That's it.
He has absolutely dithered on every position and not taken a clear side. He's hedging his bets right now. We don't know if the alliance is going to last. We don't know if he may even return to the BJP. So what is it about Nitish Kumar that appeals to you ideologically?
No, I think I would say that he is like Modi, he has no family burden, right? Unlike Modi, he's not megalomaniac, right? Okay, he is not sectarian. Even when he was the Vajpayee government, all the journalists who covered him said he is not sectarian. He focuses on gender, which is rare among Indian politicians. So there are things about him that appeal. But I think, objectively, what the remark I made about him was 7 or 8 years ago when we had this conversation on the same stage when Makers of Modern India came back. Right, now he's aged. Now he must be late 60s. So my fantasy is of no relevance to the young people in this room or to the India of the future. But maybe there could be a Macron-like phenomenon. It's hard to say what will emerge. But clearly, there is a problem with single-party dominance. Single-party dominance made even the great Democrat Jawaharlal Nehru arrogant and impervious to criticism. Single-party dominance made the instinctively authoritarian Indira Gandhi even more authoritarian. So what single-party dominance will do to Narendra Modi and Amit Shah, I started to think, right. So it's not good for democracy to have single-party dominance, as Nehru's and Indira Gandhi's example showed. So how it comes, where it comes, the people of India will decide. But Nitish Kumar is sadly, as I said, he is one Indian politician I have sympathy with for many reasons. But I think he's probably, he has no future because unless the Congress party invites him to become president. Because then...
Prime Minister, you mean?
No, president
of the Congress
of the party.
Okay.
Because then you have a leader without a party taking over a party without a leader. Right. So if that is the only fantasy, and maybe some friends in this room can convey to the past that we, all right, and it can happen. But it won't happen. So Nitish is, as I said, for several reasons, not least that a very dear and close friend of mine, whom I shall not identify, works in Bihar. And I have heard many good things about the work they've been doing in Bihar. And also, by the way, I know that from Nitish empowered the best bureaucrats in Bihar. Not those who are from his same caste, who would do his bidding, who would give him a cut on contracts. I think by and large, he chose the best. So there are many things about him that are appealing, were appealing. But unless Sonia Gandhi asks him to succeed her, there is no future for him in Indian politics.
For Nitish or for Sonia Gandhi?
Well, probably both, yeah.
But, do you feel that basically when you scratch the surface of this 50-50 democracy in India, there is a dangerous kind of appetite for strongman politics? Yeah. And it hasn't emerged with Prime Minister Modi. You're right. Yeah. Indira Gandhi and Narendra Modi in some ways could be interchangeable figures in the admiration they evoke amongst so many people.
Absolutely.
For being authoritarian in personality.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the state level again, I mean, Bal Thackeray, who was of course never chief minister but had the remote, Mamta Banerjee, Arvind Kejriwal, who's been a deep disappointment to many of his supporters, partly because of his megalomania. A person who cannot get along with someone as intelligent, as sensitive, and as reasonable as Yogendra Yadav has a problem with himself. So I'd say all of this, So I think, in the book, Barkha, in an early chapter of the book, I quote Ambedkar's prophetic warning in the Constituent Assembly, where he says, Bhakti in religion is a road to the salvation of the soul. Bhakti in politics is a road to dictatorship. Now, sadly, he himself has fallen victim to that bhakti because Dalit intellectuals can't see a single flaw in him. So this is a real issue.
No, but isn't every party defined by that kind of bhakti? It's the Gandhis and the Congress, is Mamta, Arvind, Prime Minister Modi.
Again, I said Nitish is not megalomaniac.
But
maybe Naveen Patnaik is also not, though of course he is even different. So I think, but you're right, that it is this, but by the way, again, at this...
But charismatic leaders are usually...
Yes, you are right. And also
representing strongman politics.
I would also say, Barkha, that it goes beyond politics. I mean, in this bhakti that Ambedkar recognized, this uncritical adulatory tendency among Indians to put ordinary mortals on a pedestal reserved for great gods, right, is not restricted to politics. It is very much there in business, and as I found in my recent experience, it's certainly there in cricket. Right. So this is an issue. So in that respect, it's the 50% of democracy where we aren't there. Because, satire, I mean, the British. But it may be changing. One of the nice things I now see on social media is, and I hope that, it's not policed or censored, is satire about famous people. And the British had it in spades. I think one of the reasons the British are so great and democratic is that they make fun of their most... And we must develop that. I think it's bhakti not just in politics, but in business. I mean, the aura around our successful entrepreneurs, I mean, the worshipful stories done on them in the business press, not only about them, but their spouses, their children, their cars, their houses, their cats, their dog, whatever else, right? Now, I think there is a real issue with cricket. I mean, of course I venerate cricketers, but I would never treat them as superhuman. I mean, to me, the great Indians are, people like Chandi Prasad Bhatt of the Chipko movement, Ela Bhatt of Seva, these are people whom I would venerate because they're transforming society. Someone who can score 100 against West Indies, okay, nice, good entertainment for me, but that's it.
I mean, I dare not say anything because I'm not a cricket bhakt, but I recognize myself to be marginal in those ways. But I mean, I'm segueing and diverting here, but what was your experience being in cricket administration? Is that off limits?
One day I'll write a tell-all.
Strengthen institutional freedom of speech and tell us, come on.
One day I'll write a tell-all memoir, but the time has not come.
Why did you leave?
No, my resignation letter said it all. I left for 2 or 3 reasons. One is I felt that our committee should have pushed much harder at the reforms. And I think by leaving, I think I've given them more strength. You know, after I left, the conflict of interest issue was addressed. And now you can't be an IPL coach and a national coach. Also, I think the superstar culture is nauseating. I mean, I think this is something that, you know, essentially as a Democrat, and also the last reason I left was, I said when I joined, I said, please get a capable cricketer who knows administration. And I wish they would get, I mean, I don't want to name names, but there are 2 or 3 cricketers who would be much better at that committee than I am, you know, and they should get them in. And, but, you know, that's another story. I mean, it's not about, let's talk about this book, yeah.
So the book is not writing about this moment when it's actually exploring the phenomenon of populism. And, you know, even when you mentioned earlier about this jingoism on television channels, and, you know, as somebody who's kind of devoted her reporting life to Kashmir, I agree with you that the single biggest damage to the idea of India in the Valley is the English news primetime anchor. But there can be no denying the fact that populism, by definition, it's a truism, works because it reflects a larger sentiment, a larger mood, right? So, for example, when we had the whole debate about a human shield tied to the front of a jeep, you were one of those who said, look, I understand that the army was in a difficult position, but you don't have to necessarily reward this soldier, right? That's the position you took. But if you went out and you asked 80% of India, I suspect, would say, बहुत अच्छा किया, हर Kashmiri को उठा के ये करो. Let's do this to every Kashmiri. Now, what does a democracy do when larger sentiment is pushing it in a certain direction?
No, I think the task of a statesman is to go against majority opinion. Firstly, I don't believe this is majority opinion. I don't believe, again, South India, East India may tell a different story, right? So first, it may be large sections are hungry for vengeance and retribution. But it may not be. Secondly, if a large chunk of popular opinion is against civility, decency, humanity, constitutional values, it's the task of our leaders to educate them, to contain them. That's what Jawaharlal Nehru did in 47, 48. Otherwise, we would not be speaking here today, right? And today, the most heartening thing today was Rajnath Singh's tweet.
Yes.
Right? Where he said that
I agree.
All Kashmiris have condemned it. This shows Kashmiriyat is alive. It was a very statesman-like remark, going against the grain of what his party faithful want. And it should be endorsed. I was disappointed that Ram Madhav did not retweet it. He's the BJP. If Ram, I was disappointed. I hope he does it tomorrow. He may not do it because I say it, but he should do it tomorrow. You know, I think that was a remark of someone who has the interests of civility, humanity, and the Indian Republic at heart. Right? Now, so I think the task of a great leader, Nitish Kumar is not a great leader.
But, who is a great leader?
Who
is a great leader who went against the grain of popular
sentiment? Let me finish. Nitish Kumar is not a great leader. But let me tell you that there are fine Bihari intellectuals sitting here, and they will agree with me when I tell them that Bihar is much more patriarchal than Karnataka and Kerala. But he went against the patriarchy and tried to empower young women, right? Which was, I think, so that is the, so when, see, these, I mean, there are examples around the world, and modest things, like I think, we will go up in flames, Barkha, if we said Hindu against Muslim, you know, it is just a terrible and tragic thing. I mean, it'll help no one. You may win a few elections, but over a trail of dead bodies, right? So I think, in that sense, particularly populism, you know, the Anna Hazare movement was also a populist movement. Some people felt it was too populist, it should have taken a constitutional form, but it was not, you know, promoting violence. You know, there were legitimate criticisms we made of the Anna Hazare movement. But it was, so, but when, you know, when a political party, you know, I believe that the jihadis in Kashmir, that their best friends are the Gao Gundas and the Hindutvawadis, and vice versa. Let's be clear about this, right? Fundamentally,
but are they comparable? Are they actually comparable?
Well, it depends.
Because one is again a kind of institutionalized, trained terrorism. Well, there is no other word for it,
yes,
right?
Yes. But it's like this. They're comparable in this sense. In India, Islamic terrorism is a threat to humanity and civility worldwide. So at the global level, Islamic terrorism is far more dangerous than any other kind of religious terrorism. But within India, where Hindus are a majority, and outside Kashmir, in Kashmir, Hindus are have historically been persecuted and been the victim. But everywhere else in India, it's the Muslims and the Christians. And we should worry about this. I think these are things that, so what if 80%, so what if, so-and-so channel has more viewership than a more sober channel? No, I mean, vengeance, retribution, hatred. How can you build a great country on those lines? Pakistan tried. Do you want to become like Pakistan?
But give me an example of a moment you remember from recent history. I'm not talking about the Constituent Assembly debates. I'm not talking about Nehru and Gandhi. Where a contemporary politician that we all remember went against the grain of popular opinion and took a decision. Because it was the right decision.
I think there are small things they can add up. I think the Home Minister's tweet was heartening. I think Nitish Kumar going against patriarchy was heartening. I think civil society must play a role. I think even Indira Gandhi. The fact that after the emergency, when she was an MP, and the amendments introduced by Morarji Desai and Shanti Bhushan, restoring the original character of the Constitution, she approved it and told her party, you must vote for this, right? It's a moment of recognition that you were wrong, right? And I think these are things that you could do. I mean, see, you're not looking for great heroic acts. You're looking for small acts. Obviously, an Ambedkar or a Gandhi is not going to reappear. Clearly, that's not going to happen, right? But I think small acts by people, I think, again, this may be more common in South India than in North India. But I think there are people in Kerala who are in public life who would not deliberately pit, one community against another. Even if it loses them an election, they won't take that line. So I think I would not be so despairing. Because again, I feel that democracy is not only about elections. It's about, I have said in a recent column, that even if our politicians don't believe in constitutional patriotism, tens of millions of ordinary Indians do, right? So in that sense, they'll have to assert themselves. Will they find a party vehicle, a political vehicle? That we'll have to see.
But one of the hallmarks of a democracy is the ability of people to talk to each other. Not just for us to be able to sit here and talk, but to talk across the aisle, as it were. Those conversations, the space for those conversations has shrunk. Today, even in drawing rooms, you will actually end up coming to near blows if you try and have a political conversation. So how did we come to this space where the only way we can talk is in binaries?
No, I agree. That's shrunk. And I think that social media plays a role in polarizing things. The decline of parliament is saddening. I mean, my book could not have been written without the richness and the flavor of the parliamentary debates of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. So all of that is, but young people will find new ways. I mean, democracy will reinvent itself. I mean, I'm sure. And again, you see, the extremes grab the headlines, Barkha, right? But that doesn't mean that they capture the popular mood. Necessarily, represent the feelings of ordinary
Do
Indians.
elections capture the popular mood? Or not necessarily?
No, they do to some extent. I think elections are, of course, there is an issue with election finance, with criminalization, but by and large, relatively, they're quite free. I think on the elections, since we talk about elections, I'm sorry to be plugging my hometown so much here, but lots of good things happen in Bangalore, which are invisible in Delhi. And like the philanthropists I talked about. And one more thing, a remarkable thing that has roots in Bangalore and in Delhi, is the Association of Democratic Reforms, which has argued that we should adopt a model where in every election, the winning candidate needs 50% plus one vote. So shall we say there's an election for Central Delhi, and there are 4 candidates, because in India, normally there are multiple candidates, and with 30% of the vote you win, because the next guy gets 25, then 20, then 20. ADR says have a rerun at once, and with electronic voting you can do it. So 1 and 2 have a runoff. And the person who gets more than 50% is elected MLA from Central Delhi. Now, what this will do is it will force candidates to go beyond identity politics. Non-Chamar Dalit plus non-Yadav OBC plus non-so-and-so Brahmin plus so-and-so. Because you 35, and to say you have to get more than 50% of the vote, so it will be Bijli, Sadak Pani, transparency, good governance. Now, that's a fantastic suggestion. Now, if this is taken aboard, I think the quality of our public debate will change. If you need a majority of votes to win your seat, you will no longer campaign on sectarian lines. So I think they are, Indians who are, they may not be represented in politics. They may not be on those obnoxious TV channels that neither you and I want to name. But they are around. And they've got interesting, unusual, innovative, creative ideas. And, you know, they should be taken forward.
But the reason I asked you about elections is that if we accept that elections are one barometer and a reasonably good, accurate barometer of what public sentiment is, and we also accept your own formulation that the BJP is now what the BJP is to politics what the Congress was, and in the near future you see a hegemony of the BJP, then it does raise questions for the failure of liberal, and I'm using this in quotes because I'm going to push you and say there is no really liberal party in this country, but the failure of liberal politics in India. I think liberals across the world are grappling with this question. It's not unique to India, I know that. But there is a sense of the echo chamber syndrome of liberals, the St. Stephen's College sort of trap, where you're, you know, you feel like you're talking clever things to each other. But you're not addressing anybody outside of that little club.
No, you're right when it comes again to electoral politics, to sections of the media that are obsessed with elections and nothing else, right? But I think in everyday life in society, as I said, in some areas, India is becoming more liberal. You know, my daughter has more freedoms than my wife did, right? Dalits today are still deeply exploited. But they're less exploited than they were 50 or 70 years ago. Because there's a delinking of caste from occupation. But and the more we urbanize, the more these freedoms will be expanded. But so I think we need an expansive sociological understanding of democracy in which elections are an important part, but not the only part. So from that point, I mean, if you look, and again, this may be a, you know, I live in a, in a part of India which has less violence, communal and gender violence. It has it, but less. So maybe that's colored the way I look at it. But I think, which is why India for me is still a 50-50 democracy. It is not, India is a work in progress. Again, and I sometimes make this, remark in jest, but it's actually true. If India was a startup in 1947, not even the most enlightened venture capitalists, the most optimistic venture capitalists would have invested in it, right? No, because it was doomed to fail. Now, it has stayed, it has survived, it has, and again, this is to go back to the epilogue of the book. There were two great experiments we started with. One is unifying a country that is so diverse. Two, empowering a citizenry with the vote who were illiterate. So there was the national experiment, and there was a democratic experiment. The democratic experiment is 50-50, but the national experiment may be 90-10. Apart from Kashmir is one state out of 29, and it's only the valley. So parts of Kashmir, parts of Manipur, parts of Nagaland. And fortunately, the Maoists are declining in influence, So, I mean, if you compare our nation-building experiment with Spain, with France, with Britain, with America, let alone the African countries, and you think of the civil wars they had. So, I think we've been a modest success. I think we could have done much better, but we could have also done a lot worse. And most people thought at our birth that we wouldn't survive, that 70 years ago or later, we would be discussing this ongoing experiment in this open-minded, critical way. I think, this is, it took the battle today. I think we were very lucky in the quality of the people who founded us. A nation needs visionaries to found us. We have written off the opposition. They have written off themselves. Right. However, the BJP has to contend with the living legacy of Nehru and Ambedkar. The constitutional values, and Gandhi, the constitutional values they bequeath us, which are encoded in our everyday thought, in our institutions, in our habits, in our practices, our mores, are still there. And they will continue to challenge the Hindutva majoritarianism and the authoritarianism of the BJP, right? So I think that is the battle. And it's a complex story, and the last word hasn't been said. But I will, I'm maybe slightly less optimistic than I was 10 years ago when I wrote this book.
Only slightly less.
Only slightly less. And that may be because I'm 60 years old, I'm old farts tend to be pessimistic, right? Then I was 50, now I'm 60. But only slightly less optimistic.
Let me unpack bit by bit, because you've said a lot of different things, and I want to bring up the notion of personal liberty, because you do say this in the book and you just said it again, that today in some ways individual liberties, there are more liberties available to an individual than there were 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But we are fighting all the time about what we can eat, what we can drink, and who we can love or have sex with. 377, prohibition, beef man. I'm not saying these are products of this time. These have been ongoing debates. But your favorite, Nitish Kumar, one of my big disagreements with him, is prohibition.
I think the most dangerous among these is the beef ban. All right. I think prohibition I've not studied.
But the idea that the state should determine, and I know it's done in the name of women, and I agree. I know.
But I think the beef ban, because the beef ban stigmatizes a community. That's why it is particularly multiple communities, not just Muslims, but Christians, but Adivasis, Dalits. No. So I think the beef ban is the most dangerous and pernicious. On sexual freedoms, despite the horrific and ill-informed judgment of Justice Singhvi, actually, gays are freer than they were before. Because society has changed. Society has changed. But the most obnoxious, I think, is that is a real worry. It's also dividing society, and it's in many ways, it is comparable to what happened in the late 80s and early 90s over the masjid mosque. I mean, a property dispute in a single small North Indian town, made life miserable for hundreds of millions of Indians who had never seen Ayodhya, right? And this beef ban is making life miserable for millions of Indians who don't even eat meat, right? Because of the uncertainty, the violence, the stigmatizing, all that goes with it. So, they always, as I said, the thing about India is so large, so diverse. Change is never unilinear. It's always complex. You progress in some areas, you regress in some areas. And, we'll have to fight these small battles as we go along.
But do you find a distinction in the positions taken by political parties on beef ban? And the reason I'm asking this is, I still remember Digvijay Singh getting up and saying, but the Congress did this first.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. And that is where the example of Nehru is important. Because Nehru and Gandhi had the moral courage to stand up to the bigots in their own community. And that is something which the Congress party, this B team of Hindutva and all, that was the greatness of Nehru and Gandhi. There's a wonderful editorial written by Faiz Ahmad Faid when Gandhi died, where he says this. He says the greatness of Gandhi was he stood up to the people in his own community who was so hot, and I think that is something which we are losing. I mean, this is where I think also the courts are to blame. I think Hindus are becoming more Islamic in their adoption of blasphemy laws. My name is Ram, so you know whom I'm named after. Though on Twitter I am told all the time I should be called something else. Right.
Well, at least you're not told that you should be called Burkha, which is what I'm told.
I'm saying Rahim the Burkha, that's right. But one of the nicest statements made, most interesting, this Ram Setu controversy that happened, right? Now, Karunanidhi, who was reared in the old atheistic tradition of Periyar, and being from the DMK, probably didn't have much love for, the Ramayana. When this Ram Setu controversy happened, he said, and it was a wonderful humorous remark, he said, which engineering college did Ram get his degree from? Now, you're all laughing, but I hope I'm not killed for saying this tomorrow, right? Now, because this fear has come now. So, you can't even joke about your people. I mean, if you can't satirize your gods or your heroes, I mean, and I think here is where I think some of the worries are. On the beef ban, I agree with you. The opposition parties have been pusillanimous. I think they should have been much more courageous on all of this. And for God's sake, I mean, if you look at the writing of Harish Damodaran, who's one of our finest agricultural economists, you just read him in the Indian Express, and you see how it is hurting our farmers. Our Hindu farmers are being hurt by this nonsense, right? So, and yeah.
But we have beef detection kits being made.
Maharashtra.
And when men are murdered and lynched, we send the meat for testing.
Yeah, no, it is. And this is where, the Prime Minister should, not enough to go to Sabarmati Ashram once in 5 years and shed a few tears. That's not enough. Yeah.
What would you expect him to do?
You know, I mean, again, he has to go against like Nehru and Gandhi to recognize what is in the larger interest of the country, not what stokes, the cadres. Yeah, yeah.
So one of your early chapters in this book talks about how Hindu personal law was reformed and Nehru's role in that and the debates at that time. And it's very interesting that you actually quote the lawyer for the Hindu Mahasabha.
Yeah, yeah.
And how the argument is that if polygamy is going to be struck down in Hindu society, then why not for everybody? Now we're in 2017 and we're still having the triple talaq debate.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this one of those moments where actually liberals or people who call themselves liberals are making a fatal mistake? That's actually, by not taking a position on triple talaq, and let me extend it and say it, because as a feminist, I would say I support a uniform civil code.
Absolutely, absolutely. My last column in the Telegraph, published last Saturday, was about a memoir written by a remarkable Muslim modernist of Maharashtra called Syed Qadri Bhai, who has fought against triple talaq for the last 40 years. I met him in Pune recently. It's a wonderful book. It's published in English. And he was influenced by an even greater Muslim modernist called Hamid Dalwai, who tragically died in his early 40s. I think I have said this in the past, and in the context of your question, I will have to say it again. Indian liberalism has suffered a double defeat. And the double defeat is this, that the tradition of Hindu liberalism, which extended from Ram Mohan Roy up till Nehru, is now jaded, weary, defeated, marginalized. And Muslim liberals have never enjoyed an honored or popular or influential place in the community. Hamid Dalwai was cast out. And I think this is a question every Indian has to ask himself or herself. Because of the column I wrote on Syed Bhai's book on his lifelong struggle against triple talaq, I'm getting abuse from Islamic fundamentalists for a change, including someone who from Saudi Arabia who assures me that women are very happy in Saudi Arabia. But he's a man himself, but that's a different question. So I don't know whom all he's talked to, right? So there is a real issue. I mean, this is really an issue, and our left parties, the TMC, the Congress party, have pandered to the most reactionary elements in the Islamic. I mean, where do you have, Salman Khurshid not taking a stand against it? I mean, there's something seriously wrong, right? And again, Rajiv Gandhi could have undone this. One of the great missed opportunities of Indian democracy, for which we are all paying, Hindus, Muslims, all of us are paying, is when he did not support Arif Muhammad Khan in 1986, right? And it is
but wasn't the Shah Bano case the beginning of secular malpractices or the opening of the blocks in Ayodhya, so that today when the Congress stands up and says, okay, listen, here's how we're different from the BJP, we're secular, that word is today corroded.
Totally, totally. And on triple talaq, there should be no argument. I mean, we have to have a common civil code. There's no question that we have to. Liberals should fight. I mean, if you're so scared of being on the same side as the BJP, I mean, you have to do what is decent and right and just and equitable and democratic. Rajnath Singh's tweet today was fantastic, and I said so. I mean, I may never vote for the BJP in my life. That doesn't matter. Right? But I think it has been a great failure of Indian liberals that they invent all kinds of complex, tortuous arguments to oppose a common civil code. And
I mean, mostly the argument is that it would be a Hindu code and not a civil code.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, Leela Seth, Shabana Azmi, these are people who supported it. You get the best jurists in the country it doesn't have to be the code that was drafted in the 1940s by B.N. Rao and Ambedkar. It can be something else.
So one of the things you quote from the Constituent Assembly debates back then is that the Muslims would not have a problem, but you don't have I think you're quoting Kriplani, who says that the Muslims would not have a problem in accepting it, but you, he's saying to the Congress, do not have the courage to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, you see, the tragedy is the BJP also doesn't believe in it.
In a uniform civil code?
No, they raise it to spite the Muslims. That's it. And the BJP opposes it, the Congress opposes it, but the BJP is supporting it. No one has thought it through on sensible, reasonable grounds. There's a wonderful book written by my late friend, Vasudha Dhangawar, in 1985, called the Towards the Uniform Civil Code, which lays out the arguments very clearly. And I think that is certainly, I think the young people in this room will have to take it forward. Yeah.
So I want to come back, to pull you back, because you did refer to it as a bookend to Kashmir.
Yeah.
And one of the things you argued, not in this book, but in one of your other books, was how you saw a parallel in what happened in Sri Lanka and Kashmir. And that was a very, very unusual analogy. So, I mean, I'm familiar with it, but do you want to just speak?
Yeah, I think, absolutely. I think, Sri Lanka and India are the two countries in Asia and Africa that have had a nearly 70-year experience of democracy. We had the emergency, and they had Rajapakshas. But through these 70 years, there's been discontent in one part. In Sri Lanka, a small part, the northern part, with us one state. And similar mistakes have been made. We have imprisoned popular leaders, they did it. We have rigged elections, they did it. Then on the side of those opposing the state, the rebels have gone from fighting a nationalist struggle to a holy crusade, to eliminating their own opponents. I mean, what Prabhakaran did in killing his rivals, is similar to what the jihadis in Kashmir did in killing the senior Mirwais or lone and NC workers. I mean, in the 90s, this is something that is not known among young people here, but there's a wonderful article by Anil Noria in Mainstream on this many years ago, when the jihad started in Kashmir in the 1990s. The main victims were National Conference workers and panchayat heads, because they were Democrats loyal to the Indian Republic, right? So, and I think the inability to compromise. And there were times when when the Sri Lankans could have compromised. Prabhakaran was willing, he should have laid down his arms in 2004. He would have got a fantastic deal for the Tamils. And again, there have been times in Kashmir when things could have happened, where they could have been crossed. I think the BJP and the Congress have both been pernicious. In 2002-03, when Vajpayee had reached out, the Congress boycotted Vajpayee's speech in Srinagar. Fast forward to 2000,
he said, "Insaniyat ke daire mein."
That's it. The Congress boycotted his speech. In 2007-08, when Manmohan Singh had started serious talks with Musharraf, the BJP blockaded the valley. Right now, so there are these similarities in which the large burden of blame falls on the state. But the rebels, both the Tamil rebels led by Prabhakaran and the Islamic jihadists led by, Sayyid Salahuddin and others, their hands are also dirty and bloodied. So this is, and we've not been able to, so in that sense, I feel it's a dark stain on Sri Lankan nationalism, and it's a dark stain on Indian nationalism. And that essay kind of expands on this. Yeah.
And you're saying it's a dark stain on Indian nationalism, but today most people, not necessarily me, would say to you that actually what's happening there is a stain on humanity. And you made it into this kind of...
I think because
there are sins of commission and omission by the Indian state, there's no doubt in that.
There's no doubt. It's like this.
But there is also an Islamist project taking shape in Kashmir.
And Pakistan has malign intentions.
Yes.
And Jayaprakash Narayan, who consistently sought peace in Kashmir, said this place will never be left in peace by Pakistan, which is why the Indian Republic must go the extra mile. I mean, he said this when Indira Gandhi had jailed Sheikh Abdullah. He said, release Sheikh Abdullah in 1967, let him in a popular election, and you will get the Kashmiris on your side. So it's true that it will never be left in peace by Pakistan. Pakistan has become more and more fundamentalist. The old Sufism of Kashmir has disappeared, or it has become marginal or scared. So it's a very complex situation. And, but again, small things. I mean, when the recent trouble started in Kashmir, right? When Mehbooba Mufti came first to Delhi after the killing of Burhan Wani and the protests, if Modi had met her, Modi didn't meet her, he fobbed her off to the Home Minister. Then a few months later, Yashwant Sinha went to the valley. One of your own senior BJP ministers went to give a healing touch. And he came back and asked for an appointment of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister did not give it. Now, what is the signal it sends to Kashmiris? That Narendra Modi does not even care for the views of Yashwant Sinha because he's talking to us. We don't want to talk to them. We only send you the pellet gun, that's it. So even when there's a small window, we have goofed it. And by we, I mean mostly the Congress, because the Congress has been for a long time. And now the BJP is adding to this. And how long, I mean, there have been, there have been opportunities where you could have sent a better governor. I mean, it has been suggested to this government, and I won't take names, but a governor who would have been credible in Kashmir was suggested to them. But because they don't have the imagination, the courage. The Congress didn't have the imagination or the courage either. And it is a stain on us. It is a stain on us that we have contributed. Of course, the Pakistanis have evil intentions, and I don't believe in track to diplomacy, aman ki asha. Forget it. Pakistan is an Islamic fundamentalist country in which the army calls the shots, and the ISI calls the shots, and they only want to foment trouble in Kashmir. After the Afghan war, what started as a freedom struggle has become a totally jihadist thing. But there are people. Or do you only want that territory? If you want to reach out to them, go to them. If the chief minister is coming and the prime minister won't, and this is your ally for God's sake.
Yeah.
So I think that from 1947, there have been a series of accumulated mistakes that the Delhi establishment has made, which has contributed to the problem. Pakistan will intensify it, exacerbate it, stoke trouble, and they are not a reliable. I don't believe, unlike what the Mirwais says or Hurriyat says, I believe we should just forget about Pakistan. But we should give Kashmiris justice, dignity, and honor, and we should punish those who have abused their human rights, which includes our own paramilitary and our army. Then we are a democracy.
Now, that actually is an opening for a whole different conversation, but we don't have time. I'm going to ask one last question and open this up for the audience. You have been a pretty vocal critic of Narendra Modi. Is there something after these 3 years that you would give him credit for?
Well, he's totally self-made, which is not what can be said for his so-called principal rival, right? He's got enormous energy. He works 24/7. That's all very impressive. But I feel that it is 3 years in power. Those who thought that he would distance himself from the RSS because he had marginalized them in Gujarat, have had their eyes open. I mean, there's what I called, buyer syndrome, where you buy something and you feel that you've got something, bad. Buyer's remorse syndrome. So, one can name, if you look at what Sadanan Dhume or Tavleen Singh, at Gulshan Das is slowly getting there. He's taking more time than the others, but he'll get there. It's called buyer's remorse. You thought here he's a reformer and he's a moderate, but that is, I think, as I said, my views are formed by what I know of the founding of this republic. We survive as a country because Gandhi and Nehru were determined not to make this a Hindu Pakistan. And one gave their lives for it, one worked as hard as Narendra Modi for it, right? And as a biographer of Gandhi, which is, I know, it comes from inside me. One of the defining moments in my own life was going to Bhagalpur in 1989 after the riots there. And to see what my fellow Hindus did to the Muslim weavers of Bhagalpur, and after they were killed and displaced, to find that the state government of Bihar had done nothing for their succor. It was only the Jamaat and a rich Sikh merchant, a silk merchant, Muslim silk. I don't, just because, Saudi Arabia, if people say, what about Saudi, go to Saudi Arabia. No, these are not the values of which my country is not Pakistan. My country is not Saudi Arabia. My country was built by Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi to be other than Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, right? So I feel that inside me. For me,
so do you believe that we are in danger of,
we're in danger, but Narendra Modi has not done enough to assure me that he has distanced himself from MS Golwalkar. Now, by the way, the Indian Council of Philosophical Research wants to hold a seminar on Golwalkar. Please Google my name and Golwalkar or Jyotirmoy Sharma name and Golwalkar, and he was just a common garden variety bigot. This is the man who was the fountain of RSS ideas. Narendra Modi has not done enough in these 3 years to show that he has outgrown those ideas. And that worries me, disappoints me, and makes me nervous.
And this notion of a Hindu Pakistan, since it's a phrase you've used.
And it is there about, absolutely. I mean, it is, by the way, some of the people, Barkha, look at Muslims. Muslims are underrepresented in all sections of Indian society. In the professional classes, in the media, in academics, in the army. They are poor, vulnerable. Of course, they are captive to a horrific and despicable leadership, and they have to get out of that. Of course, they are succumb to, women don't have autonomy and must fight for that. But to think that Muslims are privileged, it's just awful. And actually, among some sections of the Sangh Parivar, and this comes straight from Golwalkar, Christians are demonized as much as Muslims. Right? And I think this is, for me, this is not, forget the India I was born in. This is not India I wrote about or studied. And I think in that sense, Narendra Modi has not done enough. Many people who voted for him, endorsed him, supported him, thought that, that he had outgrown the Hindutva chauvinism of his early political upbringing. Now, maybe he's outgrown it. I think one part of Narendra Modi wants to be a state leader, wants to leave a legacy, wants to be remembered in the way Jawaharlal Nehru was. But he can't take on the other forces in his party or the. I was born and raised in Uttar Pradesh. The U in Uttar Pradesh stands for ungovernable. And it would be ungovernable even if Adityanath was not there. But to think that Adityanath, a man with such narrow-minded, bigoted views, is the chief minister of our largest state, endorsed by our prime minister, does it tell you that this person has understood what Nehru and Gandhi and Ambedkar stood for? I leave it as an open question.
I think the one thing this evening tells us is that you can actually have a conversation on a range of subjects without shouting, without getting into a fight, right? I wish more of my colleagues in the TV industry would understand that as well. Ram, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.